They deleted the episode. They erased the footage. They thought we'd forget. But one woman refused to be silenced. No shouting, no grandstanding, just a single sentence that brought a network to its knees. If you think this ends with her being ignored, think again. If you still believe in truth, in dignity, and in someone standing up without saying a word, then hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment saying, "I see through the silence," if you're ready to hold the media accountable. And don't keep this to yourself. Share it with someone who's ready to listen. The next part will show you what happened when the truth could no longer be hidden. At exactly 10:12 a.m., the lights in Studio 3B flared on the cameras rolled, and Karoline Leavitt walked calmly onto the set of The View. She didn't glance at the audience, didn't smile too wide. She walked straight to her seat and gently placed a thick folder, leather-bound, marked with sticky tabs on the table in front of her. It wasn't for show. It was ammunition. The energy in the studio was scripted as always. Joy Behar led the welcome with a faux friendly smirk. Whoopi offered her signature flat greeting. Sunny Hostin shuffled her cue cards. At first, it felt like any other episode, cordial on the surface, knives underneath. The audience, mostly unaware, applauded on cue. But 5 minutes in, Karoline shifted the tone. No warning, no dramatic buildup. She cut the scripted rhythm with one direct question. "Joy, is it true you were told to ignore the 2022 harassment complaint involving ABC's senior director?" The studio went dead silent. Joy blinked, then scoffed. Whoopi leaned forward, irritated. "That's none of your business," she said sharply, her voice carrying more heat than control. Sunny jumped in too quickly. "We're not here to relitigate private HR matters," she said, trying to pivot. Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look for the camera. She looked directly at the hosts and said, "I didn't come here to speak. I came to see if any of you are still willing to." That was it. That sentence. It landed like a gavel in a courtroom. There was no yelling, no chaos, just stunned silence. What followed wasn't a debate. It was collapse. Joy flipped through her notes, visibly thrown. Whoopi stared off-set jaw, clenched. Sunny, once the legal anchor of the table, froze mid-sentence. The producers behind the glass were already moving. Red lights blinked. A headset barked orders. "Cut the second segment. Prep backup footage. Tell control to hold transmission." But Karoline kept speaking calmly, relentlessly. She mentioned names, dates, a complaint filed on June 2022, a producer quietly reassigned, an internal email string where discretion was advised over disruption. It wasn't speculation. She had the receipts. They were in that folder. By the end of the segment, no one on set looked comfortable. Joy had stopped responding. Whoopi took off her earpiece. Sunny looked down at her lap. Fingers tight around her coffee mug. When the cameras went off, the director's voice cracked through the PA. "This episode doesn't air. Kill the file. Don't let a second leave the building." That's how fast it happened. An entire episode of The View recorded in full HD. Never saw the light of day. It didn't even make it to editing. And yet ABC had posted a 30-second teaser of the episode just hours earlier. A now-deleted clip had shown Karoline entering the studio, the hosts laughing, audience clapping. The title read, "Young Firebrand." Faces off with The View. That teaser disappeared 20 minutes after upload. No statement, no correction, nothing. For regular viewers, that might have seemed like a glitch. But for others, especially those paying attention, it smelled like something else entirely. Karoline didn't comment. She didn't tweet. She didn't post a single photo from the taping. But that folder she laid on the table, it had started a fire. Not with noise, Not with ratings, but with something far more dangerous to corporate media: unfiltered truth. And for a network built on controlling narrative, it was already too late. 24 hours after the episode that never aired, the silence was louder than anything ABC had ever broadcast. No recap, no preview, no explanation, just nothing. Longtime viewers of The View noticed it first. Monday's episode, the one advertised just 2 days earlier as Karoline Leavitt. The young firebrand faces off was simply missing. In its place, a rerun from April, a throwback interview with a sitcom actor. No mention of Karoline, no note from the network, just a quiet swap. At first, it looked like a technical error, maybe a last-minute production hiccup. But by noon, the speculation started to spread. A few savvy media trackers picked up on a key detail. ABC's YouTube teaser had vanished, taken down just 20 minutes after the original upload. No replacement, no trace, no comment. Then came the post that cracked the dam. A camera assistant, not a host, not a producer, just a quiet background crew member, posted a casual message on X, formerly Twitter, probably not thinking much of it. Just a throwaway line among the flood of daily content. There was a moment when Whoopi slammed her script on the table. We all went quiet. I don't think that segment was ever meant to air. It didn't go viral instantly. But those paying attention, especially the ones who had seen the teaser, knew this wasn't just a behind-the-scenes anecdote. It was confirmation that something had gone sideways hard. By 3 p.m., independent bloggers began speculating. Was ABC censoring the segment? Did Karoline say something that crossed the line? Or was it the other way around? Did The View implode under the weight of its own hypocrisy? Still, Karoline said nothing. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't leak emails. She didn't storm onto social media demanding accountability. She posted a single line, a single sentence. When truth gets cut from the air, ask yourself who's most afraid. No tags, no hashtags, no punctuation. Just a cold, steady statement left like a match at the edge of gasoline. That's all it took. Within hours, the hashtag "Where is the episode?" began trending nationwide. Seniors on Facebook, veterans on Telegram, Gen Z on TikTok. The same people who don't normally agree on anything were suddenly echoing the same question. Why was Karoline's episode buried? Media watchdog accounts dug deeper. They pulled archived metadata. One discovered that ABC had preloaded the Karoline episode on their internal CMS, the system used to schedule segments for exactly 9 minutes and 38 seconds before it was deactivated and replaced with a rerun. That's not a mistake. That's a directive. More whispers emerged from inside ABC. One assistant editor anonymously confirmed to an online podcast. There was panic in the control room. No one knew if legal had signed off. Everyone kept asking, do we even have clearance to cut this? The episode, it seemed, had touched a nerve deeper than any live clash ever had. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Karoline's reputation was already rising after her appointment as the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history. But now she wasn't just a rising star. She was becoming something more dangerous to corporate media, a quiet symbol of resistance. Not with shouting, not with outrage, but with strategy, with stillness, with poise under pressure. As the hashtag gained speed, other clips resurfaced past moments where The View had mocked conservative guests, selectively edited segments, and accidentally dropped interview topics when the narrative went off script. The public started drawing a pattern, and this time, it wasn't coming from mainstream journalists. It was coming from parents, veterans, retirees, everyday Americans who didn't like being told what not to see. By nightfall, The View's official account posted a generic image promoting upcoming interviews, conveniently leaving Karoline off the list. The comments section erupted. "Where's the interview with Leavitt? Why did you pull the best-rated promo of the month? If you're proud of your truth, why are you hiding it?" Still, Karoline said nothing. No interviews, no follow-ups, no victory lap. Just that single tweet now pinned to the top of her account, like a silent warning. When truth gets cut from the air, ask yourself who's most afraid. By the time the East Coast hit bedtime, 0.2 million people had shared the hashtag. Reddit forums dedicated to political transparency were flooded. Talk radio lit up. Even CNN anchors were quietly asking producers, "Do we have any confirmation from ABC?" But there was none. Because ABC was doing the one thing that screamed guilt louder than denial, they said absolutely nothing at all. And in that silence, America began to hear something louder, something they weren't supposed to hear. The sound of fear. Not from Karoline, from the people who had tried to silence her. By the third day, ABC had a problem they couldn't bury, and The View had a script they couldn't sell. The disappearance of Karoline Leavitt's episode wasn't just a missing segment anymore. It had turned into a national question whispered in kitchen tables, talk radio shows, and coffee shops from Florida to Idaho. Viewers wanted answers, and the silence from the network was deafening. So on that morning's broadcast, The View finally responded. Or rather, they tried to. Joy Behar led the charge with the kind of smirk that had worn thin with many long-time viewers. "Not everything needs to air," she said, waving her hand dismissively, "especially when it's just another lecture from someone trying to go viral off our platform. We're not here to raise interns, we're here to talk like adults." Laughter was forced. The audience clapped, but it didn't echo the way it used to. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting rigid in her chair, didn't even look at the camera. She muttered coldly, "If she wants to be famous so badly, fine. Let her try. We've seen this game before." It was the kind of segment meant to set the record straight. Instead, it exposed just how shaken the hosts really were. There was no warmth, no signature banter, just controlled contempt, wrapped in sarcasm, and a tone that reeked of fear, hiding behind pride. And that's when the cracks began to show. Not in their words, but in what came next. Just hours after the episode aired, an internal ABC email leaked this time. Not to conservative media, but to a centrist journalism group known for publishing verified corporate memos. The subject line was blunt: "Episode termination. Guest KL high risk flag." But it was the body of the message that raised eyebrows across the industry. Do not allow segment footage into post-production. No clips for social. No archive retention. Treat as we did with O'Donnell Case 2021. The implications were immediate and damning. This wasn't a technical error. This wasn't a missed file. This was a coordinated shutdown. Someone at the executive level had issued a directive to bury the footage, erase the evidence, and pretend Karoline Leavitt had never set foot on their stage. But America was watching now, and they weren't forgetting. The leaked memo spread like wildfire across social media. Independent journalists confirmed the metadata. Even liberal-leaning networks began raising cautious questions. If the segment wasn't a problem, why had ABC compared it to a known corporate scandal from 2020, one that involved legal threats and internal whistleblowers? It was now a game of damage control, but The View was playing it with a losing hand. Behind the scenes, tension rose. Sunny Hostin, usually the legal voice of the panel, suddenly went silent. For 48 hours straight, she posted nothing. No analysis. No subtle digs. Not even a meme. Her absence spoke volumes to anyone paying attention. And by the evening of day 3, ABC executives were already clashing behind closed doors. One senior producer reportedly sent a mass email urging staff to avoid discussing the KL matter outside formal meetings. Another warned talent reps to prepare fallback messaging in case further leaks occur. It was unraveling. Each attempt to downplay the situation only deepened the suspicion. Every sarcastic jab made the cover-up seem more real. And with each passing hour, Karoline Leavitt's silence grew more powerful because she wasn't fighting the story. She was the story. America had seen this before, the smug denial, the doubling down, the eventual retreat. But never had it happened in such slow motion, on a set as public as proud, and as politically loud. The View. This wasn't just a PR stumble. It was the slow implosion of a media institution caught trying to erase what it couldn't control. And it was only getting worse. Because the more The View pretended there was nothing to see, the more the country leaned in to look. The cover-up wasn't just failing, it was backfiring. And Karoline. Still no comment, no interview, no press. Just one line still pinned at the top of her profile. When truth gets cut from the air, ask yourself who's most afraid. By the end of that day, the question wasn't just about one segment. It was about all of them. How many stories had been buried? How many voices had been cut? How long had the media been deciding which truths were safe enough to air? The audience, especially older Americans who'd grown up believing in television as a trusted voice, weren't angry because it was political. They were angry because it was dishonest. And this time, they weren't switching channels. They were watching every second. By day 5, the dam finally broke. ABC had denied. The View had deflected. And Karoline Leavitt had remained silent, her one-liner still pinned at the top of her profile, like a dare no one wanted to answer. But the truth, as it always does, found a way to slip through the cracks. And this time, it came in the form of 3 minutes that would shake national media to its core. An anonymous email hit the inbox of a mid-sized online news outlet. The subject line was simple. You should see this before they bury it too. Attached was a low-resolution video file labeled Backup Out R2 Session 3142 .mp4. The metadata showed it had been created on the same day. Karoline taped her segment Tuesday morning. The source, a redundant backup camera feed. Not the polished broadcast version. Not the official cut. But the safety copy, unfiltered, unedited, untouched. The footage began mid-sentence. No graphics, no background music, just raw studio sound. Karoline sat at the panel back straight, voice even. No aggression, no smugness, just a quiet confidence that sliced through the air. You're not afraid of the truth, she said, turning calmly toward the hosts. You're afraid of who might see it. The line hit like a hammer. There was no laughter, no counterpoint, only silence, and then chaos. Whoopi Goldberg, visibly angry, slammed her script on the table. Cut the feed. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing her game. She pulled off her mic. Joy looked stunned. Sunny didn't move. The camera angle caught producers waving frantically offset, and then the screen went black. 3 minutes. No more. But it was enough. The outlet uploaded the file that afternoon. Within the hour, larger publications picked it up. By nightfall, CNN and The Hill were forced to cover it, though cautiously. One headline read, "Why was a legally taped interview with a public official buried by ABC?" The story had officially outgrown its leash. Up until now, it was a battle of claims and denials. He said she implied they refused to comment. But with this footage, Americans could finally see it for themselves. No spin, no second-hand summaries, just the raw moment ABC didn't want you to see. And what shocked most viewers wasn't what Karoline said it was, how she said it. Calm, steady, without venom. She wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. She wasn't performing for the cameras. She was asking a question they couldn't answer. And when they tried to shut her down, it wasn't because she was shouting, it was because she had struck a nerve. The fallout inside ABC was immediate. Executives scrambled into emergency calls. Senior producers demanded internal reviews. PR teams worked overtime crafting statements that ultimately said nothing. One insider speaking off the record told a journalist, "We had one rule, don't let the raw tapes leave the building." Someone broke that rule. Panic spread. Damage control shifted into survival mode. At 4:00 p.m., ABC held a closed-door meeting. One executive reportedly floated the idea of framing the host's reactions as a response to emotional fatigue or mental health strain. The logic. If Whoopi walked off, it wasn't because of Karoline's question. It was because she was personally overwhelmed. But even that spin fell flat internally. Another producer allegedly snapped. She didn't have a breakdown. She had a meltdown. There's a difference, and the camera caught it. Meanwhile, public trust began to nosedive. Viewers didn't just feel disappointed, they felt manipulated. A legally recorded segment featuring a White House press secretary had been scrubbed from public view, not for legal reasons, not for ethics violations, but because it didn't fit the network's comfort zone. For millions of older Americans who still believed in the power of broadcast journalism, this wasn't a scandal. It was a betrayal. Talk radio went wall to wall. Local TV stations picked up the story. YouTubers uploaded reaction videos with headlines like "ABC caught deleting truth" and "What are they hiding from you?" But through it all, Karoline stayed silent. She didn't reshare the clip. She didn't do interviews. No retweets. No statements. Just the same one-line post, now accumulating tens of thousands of replies. When truth gets cut from the air, ask yourself who's most afraid. What made the moment historic wasn't just the leak. It was the way it exposed the machine behind the curtain, the choreography of avoidance, the calculated silences, the corporate decisions masquerading as editorial discretion. For decades, Americans were told that if something didn't air, it wasn't worth airing. Now they were starting to realize maybe the most important truths are the ones that never make it to the screen at all. By day 7, the silence had become deafening, but it wasn't coming from Karoline Leavitt. It was coming from the people who had tried to erase her. After 5 days of corporate denial media spin and a 3-minute leak that shattered ABC's narrative, Karoline made her next move. But it wasn't a press tour. It wasn't a dramatic monologue on cable news. It wasn't even a tweet. It was paperwork, and it hit harder than any headline. At exactly 9:12 a.m., her legal team filed a motion in federal court, a formal request for preservation and disclosure of all production materials related to the unreleased episode of The View. The filing wasn't emotional. It wasn't fiery. It was cold, clear, and unflinching. The motion demanded that ABC hand over every second of raw footage from camera roll to post-production backups. All internal communications, including emails, memos, and Slack messages between producers, hosts, and ABC's legal team. The full segment log noting when cuts were made by whom and under whose directive. The foundation of the request, a single legal sentence that landed like a thunderclap across the media landscape. The deliberate suppression, deletion, or concealment of footage may constitute spoliation of evidence under federal discovery law. In plain English, if ABC intentionally erased the truth, they weren't just playing dirty, They may have broken the law. It was the first time Karoline's team had spoken publicly since the leak. And even then, it wasn't Karoline speaking. She didn't step in front of a podium. She didn't record a video. She didn't say a word. But her lawyers did. And what they said cut deeper than any soundbite ever could. This isn't about ratings. It isn't about drama. It isn't even about one deleted episode. This is about transparency, a value that was sold, censored, and buried by the very people who claim to defend it. The message was simple. You tried to silence her. Now you answer to the court. The media world took notice. Fast. Legal analysts across networks scrambled to interpret the filing. Talk radio lit up. Court TV dedicated an entire segment to explaining spoliation of evidence to millions of Americans who suddenly realized that hiding tape wasn't just unethical, it might be criminal. Older viewers, many of whom had watched The View for over 2 decades, were stunned, not because they had strong feelings about Karoline's politics, but because they remembered when television used to stand for something when a guest, even one you disagreed with, was given time to speak. Now they saw what had become of it, a curated reality filtered through fragile egos and corporate protection. ABC didn't issue a denial. They issued silence. Behind closed doors, panic simmered. According to insiders, legal advisors urged top executives to comply quietly, quickly, and completely. One former producer reportedly told a journalist, "They're less worried about what Karoline said on air and more worried about what their hosts said off camera." Indeed, whispers began to circulate. Had producers coordinated questions to trap her? Had talking points been shared with outside political groups? Had someone in leadership pre-authorized the deletion of the episode before it was even taped? Karoline's team wasn't just asking for video. They were asking for intent, and intent in court is everything. But while the media swirled and the lawyers dueled, Karoline herself remained still. No cameras, no press, no appearance on Hannity, no podcast drop with Shapiro, no Instagram stories or email blasts. Just that same single line pinned to her account. When truth gets cut from the air, ask yourself, who's most afraid? And now, with the full weight of the legal system behind her, Karoline wasn't just asking that question. She was demanding an answer. For ABC, the stakes were no longer just reputational. They were legal, financial, and cultural. Because once a court demands documents, there's no segment producer in the world who can cut to commercial. And for everyday Americans watching this unfold, not as a left versus right circus, but as a moment of media reckoning, the message was loud and clear. She didn't shout. She subpoenaed. And in a world addicted to noise, that silence spoke louder than anyone expected. By the start of the second week, the pressure inside ABC had shifted from contain the fallout to prepare for collapse. Karoline Leavitt still hadn't said a word. No interviews, no camera time, no comment. But her legal team's subpoena for internal footage emails and production logs was now a ticking clock, and ABC executives could hear it getting louder with every passing hour. In the days following the court filing, The View, once a ratings machine and daytime juggernaut, began to quietly implode from within. Not because of ratings, not because of public outrage, but because behind the smiles and stage lights, no one trusted anyone anymore. The first public crack came from Sunny Hostin. Known for her calm legal takes and rational middle ground, Sunny stunned insiders when she submitted an internal memo titled Notice of Indefinite Leave for Personal Health and Legal Discretion. It wasn't a resignation. It wasn't a press stunt. It was a quiet exit, and it rattled the building. Producers tried to downplay it, but staffers knew better. One veteran camera op reportedly said, When the lawyer on set walks out before discovery even begins, something bad's coming. Meanwhile, Joy Behar had entered damage control mode, but not against Karoline. Against her own team. She openly blamed the show's director for letting the segment run too long, for not calling cut earlier, for not deleting the backups fast enough. In a production meeting caught by an anonymous insider, Joy allegedly shouted, "This should have been handled Tuesday morning. Now it's national news." But the blame game didn't stop there. Whoopi Goldberg, always the loudest voice on the panel, wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wanted a solo episode, a platform to explain her side, to set the record straight in her own words. But legal shot that down immediately. Too risky, too exposed, too late. The leadership at ABC, once a tight circle of decision-makers, split into two bitter factions. One camp, mostly PR and financial officers, wanted a quiet settlement. Offer Karoline a non-disclosure agreement. Make a public apology vague enough to dodge liability. Cut a check, close the book. The other camp, mostly legal and content heads, feared the optics of a payout. If they paid, it meant there was something to hide. Worse, it meant Karoline had them in a legal headlock, and the entire country would see it. Meanwhile, advertisers weren't waiting for consensus. Two major sponsors pulled out quietly by Tuesday. By Thursday, a prominent family health brand suspended all partnerships with The View, citing a conflict with transparency values. On Wall Street, it got worse. Disney ABC shares dipped 3% over 2 trading sessions, not due to economic factors, but unresolved reputational risk tied to the show. Media analysts flagged the controversy in investment notes. One even wrote, "The silent strategy may no longer be viable. The legal risk is mounting faster than the public backlash." Internally, morale sank. Staffers tiptoed around each other. Assistant producers began backing up their emails, fearing they'd be dragged into discovery. One anonymous employee wrote on Reddit, "I've worked at ABC for 14 years, never seen a single guest silence an entire control room, and she didn't even raise her voice. Karoline never entered the building again, and yet everyone here is afraid of her folder." That folder had become legendary now, the one Karoline calmly placed on the table, the one that didn't need a press agent, didn't need a trending hashtag. The one that set in motion the most public unraveling of a major daytime show in recent memory. ABC had fought tooth and nail to keep it buried, and in doing so, they'd exposed more than the segment, they'd exposed their own fragility. This wasn't just a scandal about a cut episode anymore. This was a cautionary tale for every media institution in America. The days of narrative control are over. You don't get to decide what people are allowed to see and what gets wiped from the archive, because somewhere out there, someone always hits save. And Karoline. Still no speech. Still no press junket. Still no moment in the spotlight. Only silence. And the deeper that silence stretched, the louder it got. 3 weeks after the taping, after the leak, the legal filing, and the internal collapse at ABC, the moment that was never supposed to be seen finally went public, not through a press release, not through a well-crafted network segment, but by court order. It was a federal judge who made the call. Following mounting pressure from Karoline Leavitt's legal team, media watchdog groups, and growing public demand for transparency, the court ruled that the unedited footage of Karoline's appearance on The View must be released in full. No redactions, no trimming, no voiceovers. Just the raw original tape that ABC had fought desperately to suppress. At 10:00 a.m. Eastern, the video dropped on a publicly accessible court channel. Within 5 minutes, it was everywhere. No opening jingle, no graphics, just studio silence, then Karoline's calm voice cutting through the tension. "If you remain silent because it's profitable, then you are part of the problem." She didn't shout it. She didn't slam the table. She said it the way people say things when they already know they're right. Whoopi's discomfort was visible. Joy looked cornered. Sunny stared down at the table, hands folded. The clip spread like wildfire. 40 million views in 72 hours. Not just across conservative media, but on mainstream networks. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, even Reddit. Politicians on both sides of the aisle reshared the link. Independent journalists called it the media reckoning of the decade. Celebrities reposted it. Radio hosts played the audio in full, followed by minutes of stunned silence. Because now there was nothing left to deny. The very video ABC insisted was too incomplete to air was suddenly playing in full across every major platform in America. And it wasn't inflammatory. It was devastatingly calm. Karoline hadn't launched an attack. She hadn't gone on a partisan tirade. She had simply pointed out without flinching that the people who claimed to fight for truth were actively filtering it based on what protected their image. That's what made it so powerful. It wasn't scandalous. It was undeniable. And that truth, unpackaged, unedited, broke the fourth wall of modern media. That same afternoon, ABC issued a brief, almost sterile statement. It confirmed that The View would enter an indefinite production pause to reassess editorial standards, guest engagement protocols, internal communication procedures. Translation: the show was over, at least for now. No apology, no explanation, just a corporate white flag. Inside, ABC panic turned to surrender. Executives had already endured advertiser pullouts, talent clashes, legal escalation, and shareholder unrest. The release of the full episode was the final blow. Ratings didn't matter anymore. Reputation did. And it was gone. As millions watched the clip, they didn't just see Karoline challenge a panel of hosts. They saw a system, exposed a system, that pretended to stand for dialogue, but operated on silence, manipulation, and calculated outrage. And what made the moment unforgettable wasn't what Karoline gained. It was what she never asked for. She never demanded airtime. She never claimed victimhood. She never told people what to think. She simply made sure the truth was seen. 3 days after the footage aired, Karoline broke her silence. But not through a victory lap. Not in a sit-down interview. Not even at a podium. She posted a single line, almost whispered into the digital noise. "I don't need a voice, just someone willing to listen." That was it. No hashtags. No press coordination. No spin. But for Americans, especially older Americans, who had trusted institutions their whole lives only to watch them erode into scripted noise, her silence had become something sacred. She didn't win in the way media usually defines it. She didn't go viral for being loud. She went viral for refusing to be erased. And in doing so, she reminded a nation too often buried under spin filters and cut segments that truth still matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one quiet voice refusing to back down. That voice didn't demand applause. It simply said, "Watch." And America did. Sometimes silence speaks louder than outrage. Karoline Leavitt didn't shout. She didn't demand pity or play the victim. She simply told the truth, and when they tried to bury it, she didn't fight fire with fire. She let the facts speak for themselves. In an age where noise dominates and drama goes viral, this story reminds us of a timeless American value: integrity. Doesn't need a microphone, just the courage to stand still while the storm passes. For those of us who grew up in an era when broadcasters earned your trust, not begged for your clicks, this story is a wake-up call. It's not just about media bias. It's about the slow erosion of honesty in public life and the quiet power of holding your ground when others want you silenced. Let this be a reminder. The truth doesn't need to shout. To win, it just needs to survive. If this message speaks to you, leave a comment below saying, "I still believe in truth." And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders of what still matters. Truth.